September 18th, 1943, 4:37 in the morning, Willow Run, Michigan. The night air hangs heavy with the smell of oil and wet grass. A thin fog drifts across the flat farmland west of Detroit. Beyond the darkness, a building stretches so far that its edges vanish into shadow. From above, it looks like a glowing river of glass and steel. On the ground, it feels endless. Inside, the lights never go out. Riveter Clara Donnelly tightens the scarf around her hair and steps through the wide factory doors. She is 23 years old. She used to serve coffee at a diner in Ypsilanti. Now she builds bombers. The floor hums beneath her boots. Conveyor chains rattle. Overhead cranes slide along rails with a metallic groan. Somewhere deep inside the building, an engine coughs to life for testing. The sound rolls through the rafters like distant thunder. You would not know it from the quiet fields outside, but this is one of the most important battlefields in the world. Willow Run was built to produce the B-24 Liberator. Not in dozens, not in small batches. The goal was something that sounded impossible when it was first announced. One heavy bomber every hour. Clara joins her crew at Station 57. The fuselage frame moves toward them slowly on a powered line. Bare aluminum ribs catch the white light overhead. The metal is cold to the touch. "Morning," says Frank Kowalski, her crew chief. He is 39, with grease under his fingernails and a photograph of 2 sons tucked in his locker. He worked in auto plants before the war. He knows assembly lines the way a farmer knows soil. He checks his clipboard. "We are behind 6 minutes from third shift. Let us make it back." 6 minutes. In a building this large, 6 minutes can ripple like a wave. Clara climbs onto a rolling platform. She braces her knee against the ribbing and starts her rivet gun. The tool bucks in her hand, sharp bursts echoing in rhythm. Across from her, another worker presses a bucking bar against the metal. They do not speak much. The noise is too loud. They communicate with nods. The fuselage inches forward. This is not how aircraft were built before the war. Once, planes were crafted almost like furniture, by small teams working carefully over months. But by 1943, time has become the rarest material of all. At the far end of the plant, test pilot Harold Newman studies a clipboard of his own. He has flown Liberators before. He respects them, but he does not romanticize them. To him, each aircraft is a machine that must prove itself in the air. He glances through a tall window as a finished bomber is towed out toward the runway. Its 4 propellers are still. Its olive-drab paint looks fresh under the floodlights. Harold checks his watch. If the schedule holds, another one will roll out in 52 minutes. Back on the line, Clara feels the vibration through her arms. She has learned to trust the rhythm. Too slow and the line backs up. Too fast and mistakes happen. Frank walks past, watching each seam with careful eyes. "Quality first," he shouts over the noise. "Speed follows." He believes it. The management does too. The numbers matter, but so does every bolt. At mid-building, a massive overhead crane lowers a wing section into place. It moves with careful precision, guided by hand signals from workers below. For a moment, the entire line seems to hold its breath. The wing settles. Bolts slide through pre-drilled holes that were cut days earlier in another part of the plant. Nothing is improvised. Every movement has been studied, timed, refined. You can feel it in the air. This sense that something new is happening here, something larger than the building itself. Outside, the first hint of sunrise brushes the horizon. The farmland glows faintly pink. In Europe, bombers are already forming up over cold airfields in England. In the Pacific, crews are checking their charts for long flights over open ocean. And here in Michigan, thousands of hands move in coordination. Clara wipes sweat from her forehead. The fuselage section leaves her station and glides toward the next team. She steps down, flexes her fingers, and looks up at the endless ceiling. Another section is already coming. This is not just a factory shift. It is a race against distance, against oceans, against an enemy whose industry once seemed unstoppable. Frank blows a whistle. "We made up 3 minutes," he says, allowing himself a thin smile. 3 minutes reclaimed in a building that stretches for more than a mile. At the far end, Harold climbs into the cockpit of the newly completed Liberator. He runs his hand across the control yoke. The cockpit smells of fresh paint and warm wiring. He looks down the runway. Behind him, deep inside Willow Run, Clara loads another row of rivets into her gun. The line moves forward again, steady as a heartbeat. By the end of this day, more bombers will leave this building than some nations once built in a month. And it is only September. The sun climbs over southeastern Michigan, but inside Willow Run, the light does not change. It is always bright, always loud, always moving. By 8:15 in the morning, the parking lots are full. Buses unload workers from Detroit, Ann Arbor, and the small towns in between. They pour through the gates in waves. Machinists, electricians, inspectors, welders. Some wear coveralls. Some still look like they belong behind a shop counter or a school desk. Many had never set foot inside a factory before 1942. On the main floor, the Liberator advances in pieces. Nose sections arrive from one end, tail assemblies from another, wings built in parallel lines glide toward the center on wheeled carriers. What once required months of careful fitting now unfolds in a choreographed sequence measured in minutes. Charles Sorensen stands on a raised platform near the center aisle. He is one of the industrial minds behind this experiment, a man who learned mass production in the automobile world and is now applying it to warplanes. He watches the line with folded arms, saying little. When he first proposed building bombers the way cars were built, critics laughed. Aircraft were too complex, they said, too delicate, too specialized. But the line keeps moving. Clara hears the bell that marks the top of the hour. Somewhere far ahead, another completed B-24 rolls toward the airfield. Workers pause for just a second as it passes the wide hangar doors. There is no cheering, only a quiet sense of accomplishment. They have another one already halfway down the line. Frank gathers his crew for a brief adjustment. Station 57 is shaving 12 seconds per unit, he says. Keep your spacing tight, watch your alignment. He points to a chalkboard that tracks output. Yesterday, the plant produced 18 completed bombers in 24 hours, a number that would have sounded impossible only a year earlier. The scale is hard to grasp unless you stand inside it. The building itself covers more than 3 million square feet. At one point, it was considered the largest factory under one roof in the world. From end to end, the assembly path bends slightly to fit the land, creating a shape that seems to disappear into haze. Every few yards, inspectors step in to examine seams, wiring, fuel lines. They carry flashlights and clipboards. Speed means nothing without reliability. Each aircraft will cross oceans. It must return. In a side room, engineer Margaret Ellis studies a diagram pinned to a wall. She is 28, trained in mechanical drafting before the war. Her task today is to adjust a fixture that holds fuselage panels in place. The current design wastes 8 seconds per cycle. 8 seconds, multiplied by hundreds of sections, multiplied by days and weeks, becomes hours. She makes a small change, a bracket repositioned, a clamp redesigned. On the floor below, workers feel the difference immediately. The panel settles faster. Alignment improves. Margaret allows herself a brief smile. In this building, small improvements echo loudly. At noon, Clara eats lunch on a wooden bench near an open bay door. The September air feels cool after hours inside. She unwraps a sandwich and watches a finished Liberator taxi past. Its engines roar in unison, 4 propellers slicing the sky. The ground trembles as it lifts off. For a moment, the workers nearby fall silent. They track the aircraft as it climbs, banking gently before heading east. Clara thinks about the crew who will one day sit inside that cockpit. She does not know their names. She only knows that the seam she fastened must hold at high altitude, over places she has never seen. Back inside, the afternoon shift overlaps with the morning crew. The plant never truly stops. When one team leaves, another steps in. Machines are oiled during brief pauses measured in minutes, not hours. Harold Newman walks back from the runway after a successful test flight. He removes his helmet and rubs his eyes. The aircraft performed well, controls responsive, engines steady. He writes his notes carefully. He has flown enough to know that each improvement on the line matters in the sky. Late in the day, a ripple moves through this plant. Word spreads that the hourly production target has been met. Again, one bomber completed in just under 60 minutes, not once, not by accident, but as a routine. Charles Sorensen nods quietly. The numbers confirm what he believed. The same methods that once filled American roads with cars are now filling the skies with aircraft. Yet there is no celebration. The line continues. Claire returns to her station as another bare fuselage approaches. Her hands are sore. Her ears ring faintly even through protective plugs. Still, she lifts the rivet gun. The rhythm resumes. By the time darkness falls again over Michigan, the factory lights will still be burning. The fields outside will grow quiet, but inside, steel will continue to meet steel. Somewhere across the Atlantic, enemy factories struggle under shortages and bombardment. Here, in this mile-long building, output increases. You can stand on the balcony and watch it happen. Metal transforming into flight at a pace few thought possible. The line does not sleep. By late October 1943, the numbers begin to feel unreal. In a glass-walled office above the factory floor, production analyst Robert Hale studies a chart that stretches across his desk. Columns of figures mark daily output, labor hours, material flow. The lines rise steadily, almost stubbornly. He runs his finger down a column and stops at a single number, 25. That was the number of completed B-24 Liberators that rolled out of Willow Run in a single day during peak production that fall. 25-4 engine-heavy bombers in 24 hours. A pace that would have sounded like fiction 2 years earlier. Below him, the line continues its steady crawl. Robert is not a pilot. He has never seen combat. But he understands scale. Each Liberator requires thousands of parts, miles of wiring, tons of aluminum, engines shipped from other plants, instruments from still others, tires, radios, oxygen systems. Everything must arrive on time. Everything must fit. If one supplier falters, the entire rhythm breaks. He adjusts his glasses and looks toward the floor where Clara is working again at Station 57. She has become faster without realizing it. Her movements are efficient now. Load rivets, align panel, press gun, shift weight, repeat. The transformation is not just in the building, it is in the people. Frank notices it too. New workers who once hesitated now move with quiet confidence. Teams that struggled to coordinate now anticipate each other without words. They have learned the language of the line. At the far end, Margaret reviews another small modification. She has reduced the time required to install a section of wiring harness by simplifying the routing path. It saves less than a minute per aircraft, less than a minute. But when production approaches one bomber every hour, that minute compounds. It becomes another aircraft per week, then several more per month. This is the math of overwhelming. Across the ocean. In 1943, Allied air forces increased their bombing campaigns over occupied Europe. Long missions stretch from England deep into industrial regions. Crews depend on heavy bombers to carry fuel and payload over vast distances. The B-24, with its long range and high altitude performance, becomes one of the workhorses of that effort. Back in Michigan, Harold climbs into another, freshly completed Liberator. The cockpit feels familiar now. Instruments glow softly. He checks engine gauges one by one. When he taxis toward the runway, he passes rows of other completed aircraft parked in neat formation. Their wings stretch wide like a forest of metal. He thinks about the crews who will take them across the Atlantic. He keeps his focus on the test flight ahead. The engines roar, the aircraft accelerates, and for a moment, gravity yields again. On the factory floor, the bell marks another hour. Workers glance up instinctively. Somewhere ahead, another bomber leaves the line. Robert updates the board in his office. The cumulative total since the plant opened has climbed into the thousands. Willow Run alone will eventually produce more than 8,000 Liberators before the war ends. 8,000 heavy bombers from a single factory. He leans back and considers what that means. In the early years of the war, Axis industry expanded rapidly, producing aircraft in large numbers. It once seemed that the balance of production might favor them indefinitely. But now, here in Michigan, output accelerates. The scale becomes strategic. Clara does not think in terms of grand strategy. She thinks about keeping her line moving, but even she senses the weight of it. Newspapers in the break room carry headlines about new offensives. Photographs of bomber formations fill entire pages. She studies one image during lunch. Dozens of aircraft flying in tight formation above a blanket of clouds. She wonders if any of those planes began here under these lights. Frank joins her on the bench. "They are counting on us," he says quietly. She nods. As winter approaches, snow dusts the fields outside Willow Run. Trucks continue to arrive through cold mornings. Steam rises from rooftops into gray skies. Inside, the temperature stays steady. The noise never fades. One evening, near the end of a long shift, a minor delay threatens to ripple backward along the line. A shipment of fasteners arrives, slightly out of sequence. For a few tense minutes, supervisors confer rapidly. Then, an alternate stockpile is rolled into place. The gap closes. The rhythm resumes. In this building, problems are not ignored. They are solved quickly, refined, improved. Robert adds another mark to his chart. 26 today. He sets down his pencil and listens to the distant hum of machinery. It sounds almost like a heartbeat echoing through steel. Not chaotic, not frantic, measured, relentless. Somewhere far from Michigan, enemy planners study their own charts. They measure losses. They attempt to replace what has been destroyed. They calculate what they can sustain. And here, under endless fluorescent light, a different calculation unfolds. One factory, one line, one bomber nearly every hour. The balance is shifting. January 15th, 1944, 6:10 in the evening. Snow sweeps sideways across Willow Run airfield, driven by a hard Michigan wind. Floodlights cut through the blowing white. Beyond them, the factory windows glow like a city contained inside one building. Clara pulls her coat tighter as she crosses from the parking lot. The cold bites her cheeks. She has been working double shifts more often now. The demand has not slowed with winter. It has grown. Inside, the heat and noise swallow her at once. The production board near the entrance shows totals from the previous month. December output surpassed earlier records. The line has tightened further. Adjustments made in autumn are now standard practice. What once felt like acceleration now feels normal. Frank stands near Station 57, reviewing a small chart pinned to a support column. He has begun tracking not only speed, but fatigue. Too many hours can dull attention. Too much pressure can lead to mistakes. "We go steady," he tells the crew. "No rushing." Margaret walks by with a stack of updated blueprints. Minor refinements continue even now. A bracket strengthened here, a cable route clarified there. Improvements never stop. Above them, Robert reviews new figures sent from Washington. National aircraft production has surged across the country. Fighters, transport planes, bombers. But Willow Run remains one of the clearest symbols of what mass production can achieve when applied at scale. He stares at a telegram summarizing recent operations overseas. Large formations of heavy bombers are striking industrial targets deeper than ever before. The distances are vast. The losses are real. Yet the formations keep returning. He knows what that implies. Harold finishes a cold weather test flight just as darkness settles fully over the airfield. Ice had formed lightly along the wings at altitude, but de-icing systems performed as designed. He notes it carefully. When he climbs down from the cockpit, he pauses beside the aircraft and looks back toward the factory. Even through the snow, he can see silhouettes moving inside. Another bomber is already nearing completion. The weight of it begins to feel tangible. Each Liberator that leaves Willow Run carries more than metal and machinery. It carries fuel capacity for long-range missions. It carries crews trained across the country. It carries the expectation that production will not falter. Clara returns to her station and begins fastening a new section of fuselage skin. The metal feels colder than usual. Her hands move automatically, muscle memory guiding each motion. She remembers her first day here, the confusion, the noise, the fear of falling behind. Now she sets the pace for newer workers beside her. A young man named Thomas joins the station this week. He looks barely 19. His older brother serves overseas. Thomas watches Clara carefully, trying to match her rhythm. "Do not fight the tool," she tells him during a brief pause. "Let it work with you." He nods, gripping the rivet gun with stiff fingers. The bell rings. Another hour. In the center aisle, supervisors gather briefly around a completed aircraft. The monthly target has been exceeded again, not by accident, not by luck, by refinement layered upon refinement. Robert walks the floor that evening instead of staying in his office. He listens to conversations between workers. They talk about ration books, about letters from abroad, about children learning to read, about weather forecasts. Life continues, even inside a machine built for war. At a side door, a freight train unloads crates of components from other states, engines from Ohio, instruments from New York, aluminum from plants scattered across the country. The entire network feeds into this single line. This is not only a factory, it is a node in a vast system stretching coast to coast. Margaret stops near a window and watches snow swirl outside. She thinks about how far these aircraft will travel, from Michigan to training fields, from training fields to coastal ports, from ports to airfields in England or island strips in the Pacific. Distance collapses under production. Late that night, Harold reviews cumulative totals. Since its start, Willow Run has produced thousands of B-24 bombers. By war's end, it will surpass 8,600 aircraft, a figure that few would have believed when ground was first broken on this farmland. 8,600 heavy bombers from one facility. Clara does not know that final number yet. She only knows the rhythm of the line, the warmth of the lights, the constant motion. Near midnight, another Liberator rolls slowly out of the hangar doors into the snow. Its engines ignite, flames flickering briefly in the exhaust before settling into steady thunder. Workers pause again to watch, not cheering, not celebrating, simply witnessing. The aircraft taxis forward, turns into the wind, and accelerates down the icy runway. Snow scatters behind it. Then it lifts, climbing into the dark sky. Frank exhales slowly. "That is another one," he says. Inside the factory, another fuselage is already halfway assembled. The turning weight of production is no longer theoretical. It is visible in the sky above Michigan, hour after hour, and across oceans, the balance continues to shift. June 6th, 1944. Just after midnight, somewhere over the English Channel. Inside a B-24 Liberator, the drone of 4 engines blends into a steady vibration that hums through the metal skin. The aircraft moves in formation, dark shapes stretching wingtip to wingtip across the night sky. Below, faint lights flicker along the French coastline. In the waist section, a crewman adjusts his headset and peers into darkness. He does not know who built this aircraft. He does not know about Clara or Frank or Margaret. He only knows that the seams hold steady, the engines pull strong, and the instruments glow reliably in the cockpit. Behind him, painted in small letters near the nose, is a factory code marking it as one of thousands born in Michigan. Back at Willow Run, it is early evening on June 5th. The time difference stretches across the Atlantic, but the factory floor remains bright and alive. Clara wipes sweat from her brow and checks her alignment one more time. The pace has not slowed since winter. If anything, it has intensified. The news from Europe has grown urgent. Something large is underway. Frank gathers the crew briefly. "Whatever happens out there," he says quietly, "we keep doing this right." No speeches, no drama, just a shared understanding. In the engineering office, Margaret studies updated requests for minor modifications based on field reports. Improved insulation here, reinforced mounts there. The aircraft evolves even as it flies missions. Feedback loops stretch from combat zones back to drafting tables in Michigan. Robert stands once more at the balcony overlooking the mile-long line. He no longer needs the charts to understand the scale. He can see it. Where farmland once lay, a river of production now flows without pause. One bomber nearly every hour at peak pace. Thousands completed, thousands more supported by parts and maintenance. He thinks back to early doubts. The belief that complex aircraft could not be built like automobiles, that such scale would sacrifice precision. Yet here it stands. By the end of the war, Willow Run will have produced more than 8,600 B-24 Liberators. Across the United States, total aircraft production will climb past 300,000 of all types. Fighters, transports, bombers, numbers that reshape the balance of air power. But inside this building, the achievement does not feel abstract. It feels like sore hands, like ringing ears, like night shifts under white light. Late that evening, Harold walks alone along the edge of the runway. Another newly completed Liberator sits ready for delivery. He runs his hand across the aluminum skin, feeling faint ridges where panels meet. He has flown hundreds of hours testing these aircraft. He trusts them. He looks back at the factory windows glowing against the twilight. "You built a lot of wings," he murmurs to himself. Inside, Clara finishes her shift just before midnight. She steps out into warm summer air. Fireflies flicker over the fields that remain beyond the plant's edge. She turns once to look at the building. Even now, another crew has taken her place. The line continues without her. You can imagine standing there beside her. You would hear the distant rumble of engines testing on the field. You would see light spilling from endless rows of windows. You would feel that something larger than a single factory has taken shape. A system of standardized parts, timed stations, constant refinement. An answer built not in a single dramatic moment, but in steady repetition. Across the Atlantic that same night, formations of heavy bombers move over occupied territory in support of the largest amphibious landing in history. Some will not return, many will. Each mission depends on range, fuel capacity, structural strength, on rivets set correctly, on wiring secured tightly, on engines tested carefully in Michigan before ever seeing combat. Willow Run does not win battles alone. No single factory does. But by 1943 and into 1944, its output becomes part of a wider tide, one that overwhelms through endurance and scale rather than spectacle. The story is not about a single aircraft. It is about repetition until repetition becomes momentum. It is about turning farmland into flight lines, about teaching thousands of ordinary citizens to build machines once considered too complex for mass production, about proving that industrial organization can shape the course of a global conflict. When the war finally ends in 1945, the lights at Willow Run will dim, the line will slow, the river of aluminum will quiet. But for a crucial stretch of time in the heart of America, one factory helped fill the sky, and in doing so, it helped outbuild an empire.